Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Lean In New York City Network's live interview series, Leaning Into the Future of Work, hosted by your New York City Network leader, Deborah Albert. Today, Deborah will be speaking with dynamic Dan Spuller of the Blockchain Association. I'm Michelle Liu, and I'll be moderating today's broadcast and for your questions and comments. Just a few housekeeping items. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Post it in the comments section. Please also use this area to ask questions too. If you like what you heard, let us know. Tap that like button, click that heart emoji, and comment with your reaction. Now, without further ado, here's Deborah.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited for today's guest because everywhere you go, you read about the blockchain, you read about cryptocurrency, and yeah, you might have an idea of what it is, but for the most part, people I've interacted with don't quite get it. So what we're going to do today is absolutely explain it so that the layperson, the non-tech savvy person can understand it and get involved in it because it is the way of the future. So today we have Dan Spuller. He serves as the Director of Industry Affairs for the Blockchain Association, which is a nonprofit membership association. And it's one of the fastest growing industry trade groups in DC. Dan's been in this space and has been an advocate for blockchain, Bitcoin, and other decentralized digital asset technology, which we will be talking about, since 2012. In 2013, he founded the Cryptolina Bitcoin Expo, and after working for North Carolina's Department of Commerce, he moved to DC, and from 2016 to 2020, he led membership and growth at the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And frankly, I never knew there was a Chamber of Digital Commerce, so you learn something new every day, right? In 2019, he was named co-chair of the North Carolina Blockchain Initiative, and last year was appointed to the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond's Business and Payments Advisory Council. Lot. So here's the bottom line on Dan and why he's here today. Basically, government officials at all levels, from the Department of State, Treasury, Commerce, leaders of industry and corporations, regulators, lawmakers, they all basically turn to Dan for his opinions and insights. So I guess the guy knows a thing or two, and he'll tell us today about where it's going and why we all need to understand and grasp its implications and applications of this not so new anymore technology. So Dan, welcome.
Well, hello. Well, thanks so much, Deborah, for having me. That was quite the introduction. I appreciate it. You make me. I don't know if that introduction serves me well, but I appreciate it.
Hey, it's stuff that I read about you and stuff you said, so it's got to be true, right? You verified it. It wasn't on the blockchain, but you verified it.
That is true. I've been around it for a while now. So, but anyway, it's great to be with you today. It's really an honor. I'm a big fan of the work you're doing. I've spoken at a few other of these virtual events, and I'm just thrilled to be with you this afternoon.
Thanks. And I hope our audience will feel the same because they're going to learn a lot. So let's get right to it, okay?
Sure.
We're dealing with an audience that, let's say, is not, in the thick of it and working in the industry as you are. So let's start from the very beginning. What is blockchain technology?
Well, great question. And, it really started in 2008 when an individual or a group known as Satoshi Nakamoto released a white paper. It was actually Halloween 2008. And then about a month and a half later, 2 months later, it was released formally as the Bitcoin blockchain. But let's just get down to basics. In the simplest terms, a blockchain can best be described really as a ledger. Blockchain as a term has become a near household name, and it's frequently overcomplicated. So again, at its core, it's pretty mundane. It's simply a ledger, and it's important to note that blockchain technology is just that. It's a technology. It's not just cryptocurrency.
Hold on. Can I just stop you for 1 second? Because I want to remind you of something we've been saying every time I've spoken to you before this. And I want to tell the audience that I'm going to be interrupting Dan like a crazy woman. Every single time he says something that I think is a buzzword or a word that isn't absolutely understood by everyone, I'm going to ask him to explain it. So this is going to be a little bit of a different experience for me too, because I'm really trying to gauge, how to bring it down to its most simplest terms. And when I think of the word ledger, I know what it means, but I've never taken an accounting course in my life, but I understand it basically, but some people may not. So Dan, go back for just a half a step. And remember, everybody, I'm going to be interrupting him more than I've ever interrupted anyone in my life, because this guy's such an expert. He doesn't think on the most simple terms as I do. So I'm hoping to be able to lead him into giving you the most basic understanding. Okay, so what's a ledger, Dan?
Yeah, great question. Let's just start off with that, because it's probably the best way to just kick off the conversation. Ledgers, as many of you know, they've revolutionized society, since antiquity. Whether we realize it or not, these ledgers rule our life. They're the backbone of wealth accumulation, in society, from bank accounts to stocks to real estate records, and even social media platforms. I think the difference, though, with blockchain is that it allows individuals to complete transactions without an intermediary. And so a blockchain's transaction is permanent and it can be audited easily. It's a software innovation, and it's a way to store information that can record any changes that are made. And it can be applied to a variety of use cases that we're going to be covering in a little bit. But I think the difference, though, between the traditional ledger and a blockchain is cryptography. That's the key to the security of a blockchain ledger. What public key cryptography does is it uses a pair of keys to encrypt data, and it protects it from unauthorized uses. So they're very secure, and they're a fantastic way to store information without worrying about hacking or a data theft. And today, the oldest and largest blockchain is the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what they would be. And you can see in the slide here.
Can I bring it down just a half a step again?
Sure.
So basically what you're saying is a ledger, which is a record of transactions, right? The data that gets on this ledger can never be changed, anything in the past. Only it can be added to, right? It can be addended, right?
Yeah, it's immutable. So that's an essential characteristic. There's really 4 essential characteristics, for the audience to know about blockchain. It's transparent. It's auditable, meaning you can actually review it. It's cryptographically secure, as I mentioned, and probably most importantly is it's immutable.
Immutable meaning you can't change
meaning
it.
That, yeah, you can't, it's like somewhat of a timestamp or a fingerprint. It's there and it's recorded. And that is a pretty incredible innovation. And it's something that it's being used more and more in different aspects of our life within this space. So Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, was the first use case that kicked it all off. But now, as we'll discuss later, it's affecting lots of different industries, and It's establishing lots of digital trust between users.
So I remember in one of our previous conversations, you said that, this is, again, very basic, but Bitcoin was sort of like Google Docs. A lot of people are familiar with Google Docs. Somebody creates a document, whether it's a spreadsheet or a Word doc or whatever, and they put it out there, let's say out there into the universe, and anyone can see it. And it generally tracks all the changes that have been made to it so that everyone can see who's changed it, edited it, etc. So I think what you're saying is that the blockchain is very similar to that.
The next slide, I think, that we had presented covers that analogy. And it's a great analogy. And now I want to mention a Google Doc is technically not a blockchain, but it's a pretty accurate analogy to how a blockchain works. So as we discussed, at its core, blockchain is a decentralized database, and it's shared across a network. And with Google Docs, a person, you or I, can choose to make a link to access the Google Doc public, like an open source chain. And then anybody can view or edit that said document, but there's a record of any edits that have been made. And you can choose or select a group of persons also if you'd like to make it a private chain. And so we didn't cover that yet, but there's permissionless and permission chains, public and private. It's something we can cover if you'd like.
Later. Let's get back to basics. Okay. So,
and we use that Google Doc analogy too, by the way. We speak to other groups, like some of our team spoke at local libraries just to give blockchain 101. And we use the Google Docs analogy, again, though it's not an actual blockchain because it's centralized with Google, the method behind it is a fairly accurate analogy.
Or at least it's a nice sort of bridge to understanding it. Yeah. So, okay, you talk about distributed, okay, and decentralized. Let's let's delve into some of those words, because those are words that constantly come into contact with the words blockchain and crypto and Bitcoin. Let's talk about what that all means.
Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. Distributed networks ultimately eliminate the centralized middleman. That's, again, a very, very big innovation with this technology. But how is it going to transform the world? So it's happening across a variety of use cases. It's removing intermediaries. And so how does that work, you might ask? A decentralized or distributed network removes the central intermediary, like we see in this example here with the bank. I think that's probably a pretty accurate way, or a simple way to kind of realize how this would work. Or imagine if you're taking an Uber. We've all taken one. So in order to pay your Uber driver for a ride, currently your credit card information is going to be sent to Uber, the company, who then interacts with your credit card company to ensure that you are who you say you are and that you have enough funds in your account to complete the transaction. And once verification is complete, the credit card company sends payments to Uber, funds trickle down, and everybody eventually gets paid, including your driver. This takes time, though, and fees. So with blockchain networks, these eliminate these middlemen, meaning in this example, credit card company and Uber. So instead, by using a blockchain network, it allows you to send funds directly to the person on the other end of the transaction. And think of it as sending digital cash. And once the ride's over, I send the payment, blockchain network validates it, records it as a payment, as we discussed, records it on the blockchain. And in a matter of minutes, the transaction is complete. So that's innovation. Now, it's not really a negative, but most transactions are also irrevocable. So that's, I think, a difference between relying on centralized networks or a bank, where you can have a case where if you want to have payment reversed, or if there was some kind of discrepancy with blockchain networks, most of these are irrevocable.
I see. So let me put this into today's terms. I was thinking as you were talking, it sounds like, Venmo or PayPal, right? Because I can just send you money right now without, at least I don't know that I'm dealing, if I am, with any centralized party. But I mean, I can send you money right now digitally. So I can send you digital cash. So, and you're right, what you just said, I can get it back if I want to dispute. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe in this case, PayPal's and Venmo's, even though they're the same company, maybe they are the central.
Yeah, in that example with
entity.
Venmo, that would be one of the middlemen. Exactly, that would be one of the middlemen that brokers.
So you're saying with the blockchain, once I release these funds, or once I do anything on the blockchain, it's done.
Yes, right? Because the network would validate the actual transaction, and the payment would be recorded in a matter of minutes, depending on which chain you're using. Some are faster, some are slower. But then the transaction will be complete, and it eliminates the intermediary.
Okay.
And so that's a financial transaction, but it could be applied in multiple different areas.
So I can see why I would not want to necessarily have to pay the fees of a bank to facilitate my transactions. Where else does this show up? Why else do I want to use the blockchain as opposed to whatever I'm using?
Well, there's numerous different use cases, and I know we may cover it later if we could dive into it right now, because I think it's important for everybody to know that it's far beyond crypto assets and cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. That's the original use case. It's still probably the biggest to date, but use cases are really pretty widespread. So let's scroll down to that other slide. I think we may pass one over, but I would say the next one. So these are some use cases that I highlighted that I think may be interesting to kind of cover. This day and age, election integrity. So we're working, and I've interacted with several companies. One of them is called Votes. They're working on a blockchain-based mobile voting platform. So voting is a very sensitive topic. It hits home for everybody. It's unlike even payments. That's a constitutional issue here in our country, voting. But what they do is they're eliminating. They're using a secured, smart biometrics platform with real ID verification and blockchain for irrefutability. So
stop right there. This is where I'm going to interrupt you totally. Could you explain every single word you just said? No, I'm kidding. But
No, it's
go back. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on the basics too. I mean, the idea of, using blockchain technology for making sure that everybody can vote and votes get counted properly, et cetera, is definitely near and dear to our hearts. But could you use more basic terminology to explain what you're saying?
Yeah, I can help with that. I mean, and I don't work for the company. I've spoken with them, and they actually, can far better explain the technical details of it. But
it's not about the technology. It's like what how does
it's fine. It's
using the blockchain help this issue?
Well, past attempts at internet-based voting, I mean, everybody's been talking about this for years, but past attempts have failed mostly, or they haven't gone mainstream because there's been fundamental concerns around security, auditability, and voter anonymity. We vote anonymously here. And this, in many ways, according to them and the pilots that they're doing, solves those challenges. And they do that through a combination of biometrics and then security for blockchain. It's able to tackle all these challenges, and it streamlines the process of identity verification. So it proves, your identity, your one person, one vote, and it's secured with your biometric and real-time ID verification. And so the pilots, and I need to do probably a little more digging on it, but I know the City Council of Chandler, Arizona recently is doing a pilot for next year. West Virginia did a pilot for one of their, and so did the state of Oregon for one of their statewide offices. And the company is also doing a lot of private elections, like conventions, boards, and shareholder meetings. I think that's where they're going to get that off the ground, probably with some smaller elections first, like if you're a shareholder, because public elections, I think eventually it'll happen. But it's just an incredible use case, and I think that's important for everybody to see the profound expanse of this technology, what goes beyond. And there's others.
Yeah,
I mean, look at this list, like real estate, agriculture.
Yeah, I do want to talk about those, but it's interesting, though, that sort of wherever you go, whoever you talk to, you basically hear blockchain and Bitcoin in the same sentence. Yeah, most of the time. Yeah. Well, maybe you don't because you're, at a different level than we are. But why isn't everybody thinks about Bitcoin, do you think? Maybe even Ethereum, another...
Part of it is, the Ethereum. I just use the term cryptocurrency in general because that can include Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin and thousands of others. People still frequently refer to Bitcoin and use that and cite that because it's volatile, but it's also the original and it's the largest blockchain to date, and it's certainly the most secure and biggest. And it's become a very large digital asset for financial purposes. I don't want to call it an investment, but originally it was intended to be a currency in the white paper that was put forward, as I mentioned, by Satoshi Nakamoto. Over the years, folks still spend it. I spent some years ago, but nowadays most people hold it more as a store of value. And you'll hear more and more about that in the coming years. And it's become much more mainstream. I mean, the SEC just approved their first Bitcoin futures ETF, which was a very large milestone. And
electronic funds transfer.
Exchange traded fund.
Sorry, we all don't know what you're talking about. I'm the first to admit it.
But just the fact that that's happened, I mean, that means that that would have been unheard of 2 or 3 years ago. So it's become far more mainstream, certainly on Wall Street and in just for individuals that are interested in having alternative investments.
Right. So you said before you think it's going to be something that people are going to sort of just save. Yeah. Is it like buying silver or buying gold kind of thing?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's regulated. Depending on the jurisdiction you're in, it can be classified as a currency. It can be classified as a commodity. It can be classified as property. The IRS considers it property for tax purposes. And so that's what I mean. We're, as an association here in Washington, we're still working with these policymakers to get their heads wrapped around it and to make sure that it's, and it's not just Bitcoin, but the other digital assets that are proliferating these days.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about your role for just a second, because, there's a lot of scuttlebutt out there about, ethical AI and, Big Brother watching, et cetera. Your role is to bridge the understanding of industry and policymakers, basically, so that this technology can grow and provide the most value for good, let's say. So for the people who haven't embraced this yet, and people who are thinking about, big brother, ethical AI and all that nefarious stuff, what do you want to say to these people? Why should they not be scared?
Yeah, the term embracing it, I guess the fact is it's already here. So it's really not a matter of embracing it or not. It's already a fact of life, and it's become a very large industry. I think as we speak to these elected officials and politicians and regulators, it's gotten a lot better over the last few years. 2 or 3, 4 years ago, most wouldn't even want to take a meeting. But now more and more are, and more want to discuss it. So there was what's called the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, which exists. It was founded a few years ago. There was only 2 or 3 members of it back in 2016. Now there's almost 38 or so. And so that's, to me, a sign that this is becoming much more accepted, at least listened to. And
right.
A lot of it is because of the work we've been doing, educating members on Capitol Hill, as well as at the state level and throughout the world. And to me, no technology ever, kicks off and becomes mainstream without, years and years of ups and downs, and it's never unanimous consent. And when something like this, which is completely decentralized, it's very similar to the internet, which was launched, and it's been 40 years since a lot of it has become mainstream. But it wasn't until the browsers really came of age in the mid 1990s that it became accessible to most individuals. And so the regulators at the time we're seeing a lot of parallels between the way that was regulated and how it is today. And I think this is a very important technology, in addition to artificial intelligence, as you mentioned. And there's several other emerging technologies that run in the same circles as blockchain that are going to have large impacts on our life over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those use cases that I do want you to describe are sort of telling as to why. Clearly, this, it's totally disruptive. It's going to disrupt more as the people who are creating all these different things find different use cases for it. And wow, that's exactly why we're doing this today, because it's really important for people to get to understand all this stuff. We have questions, I think, which is why Michelle's trying to get on.
I'm trying to pop in and gently disrupt.
Pop in, darling.
I have a question from Marjorie. She asks, how does the money actually get into blockchain? So thank you for asking this question, Marjorie.
That's it's I guess it depends on the blockchain you're referring to, but anything could be considered valuable. You take a look at gold. There's intrinsic value. There's monetary value. Bitcoin is scarce. So if we just use that as the example to your question, there's only going to be 21 million of them. So when the initial white paper was released with the original code, it was a fixed supply. So when something is fixed, when something is scarce, it creates value. And that's one of the reasons why other items in the world are valuable. And so again, I don't look at it so much as a currency, at least certainly not fiat currency, because it can't be it just can't be created or developed by a central bank. So it's not so much how money's put into it.
Fiat being printed money.
Government issued money, right? And that, to me, and fiat money is obviously can be issued in the United States. It's not backed by anything tangible, except now currently by the full faith and credit of the United States. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is backed by mathematics. It's backed by scarcity, and so that's what gives it value. So it's not so much putting money into it; it creates value.
So, Badan, I'm going to really ask a kind of a dumb question, if you will. Two dumb questions.
Not dumb to me. I still ask all types of questions. I still am not an expert in this, believe me. So I love entertaining questions.
Okay, good. So there's a part of me that says, this water bottle, I think this is valuable, and I want you to buy it for $100. Mm-hmm. Why are you going to do it? Why? I want to understand why this white paper said, I'm going to put a code out there into the universe, dare I say metaverse, but that's another topic. And it's going to have value. Mm-hmm. Why was that person able to sell this line of code for a certain amount of money, which then has gone up to $69,000. And we'll talk about this later, that the value has dropped precipitously in the last week. Why is this not of the same realm?
Yeah.
Why can't this be a Bitcoin?
Existing forms of value and money have taken different forms over millennia. I mean, at one point, seashells in some cultures were considered value of transfer. In many areas, water is considered that. It depends on, in many ways, it's in the eye of the beholder. It depends on the society you live in, what you consider valuable. There's individuals out there that trade and purchase extremely valuable forms of art. And intrinsically, there may not be much value there, but it is scarce. It's the artist is very, very well known, and that is a source of value. Bitcoin was created by this entity, Satoshi Nakamoto, to solve a lot of the problems in the economy. If you notice, when it was issued, it was right after the financial crisis, and it came of age really in the shadows of that because of the incredible amount of government stimulus and spending that had been happening, which philosophically it definitely leans more in one direction, but beyond the philosophical part of the concept of Bitcoin, it's just grabbed hold of corporate finance, mainstream finance worldwide because of its secure nature and its scarce value.
Okay. I sort of get it.
I think, your bottle of water there. I mean, again, if we were all trapped on a desert island, that would be by far the most valuable asset people would kill for it. And
You're
so
it
takes different shapes throughout where you are.
Okay, that actually makes sense. And your analogy of seashells, et cetera, also kind of resonates, because when you look at all the currencies around the world, the printed currencies, fiat, it's amazing how sometimes some of them, coins especially, just disappear from the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And other things come into play. So that makes sense. So a lot of people are concerned about, when they think about anything with money and decentralization, the next question is like, what about regulation? Because we as a society are so used to the centralized regulatory bodies dealing with something that's so important to all of us, money. How do we make that shift to something that's deregulated? Or is that not the right word? Because maybe I'm confusing deregulation with decentralization. Is that what I'm doing wrong?
Yeah, there's a difference. And I think there's a few different ways that things are being onboarded, or there's a few different issues going on right now where the world's being bridged from the physical world to the digital world, because digital transformation is happening all over the place, not just in blockchain. And so one of the issues, I think, one of the topics that I think is very interesting is the concept of a stable coin or a central bank digital currency. So right now, the Federal Reserve actually just last week, I think I have it on my desk here, they put out a report, and it's now they're beginning to explore the concept of perhaps the Fed issuing a central bank digital currency, which is nothing more than a digitized version of the US dollar. So it would still be fiat, but it would be in digital form. So similar to cryptocurrency, but this CBDC theoretically would be backed by the United States government. And they're starting to do this because they're seeing the world is becoming more and more digital and distributed. Other countries are already doing pilots on this very topic. And it's not just finance. Whether most people in your audience have been using digital assets for years, whether you want to consider it or not. I mean, we tend to overlook the amount of digital assets that we already work with. This can include photos on your iPhone. That's considered a digital asset. Frequent flyer miles, that's considered a digital asset. Even trying to think of some other examples here. iTunes, your music, those are considered digital assets because they are not in physical format. But they still have value.
But it's still something to have, and that is considered valuable. Is that it?
That's right. It is right. Now, those aren't crypto assets because frequent flyer miles or credit card reward points are typically centralized under the company that you work with, like if it's Delta or if it's US United or if it's Chase. And the same thing with iTunes. I mean, you own those, you purchase those, but once you become deceased, to my knowledge, I don't think you can pass those on. I think they still remain Apple's property. I need to check that out, so don't quote me on that.
Well, also, I think
those are the
once
jobs
we
of
all
the future.
pass on, once we all pass on, I don't think our kids are going to want the same music anyway.
That's a great point. Yeah. Everything. It's like the old records and the cassette tapes we all have.
Exactly. It's a moot point. Oh, you're aging yourself, Dan. That's okay. I'm older than you are. Okay. So.
But I don't know if it answered your question, though. I mean, I know that was kind of, we went off a little bit on digital assets there, but there is transitions that are happening right now that even the government's taking into consideration on the regulatory side.
Go ahead, Michelle, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. We just have a lot of great questions coming in, and I just want to make sure that we do answer a little bit more of them. Someone had asked earlier if they're correct in their understanding how is the value of each credit is determined. You had answered this question a little bit earlier, but they wanted to learn a little bit more. So how has scarcity shaped the world? It looks like it's a lot of speculation and gambling. We've seen this a lot in the news, too.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, listen, I wouldn't say Bitcoin isn't speculative. I mean, it's highly speculative. And it's very so, but the scarcity question, I mean, that could also be applied to land. You know, in the old days, there was land grabs. And when they did the Homestead Act in the United States in the 1800s, everybody went out to get as much land as they could. And it was highly speculative, but the government was giving it away. And land is very scarce. What else is? I mean, you know, water and a lot of commodities are. So I wouldn't consider Bitcoin an investment. I mean, there's investment tools that have been built around it, and you can acquire Bitcoin just like you can acquire silver or platinum or gold. But there's other financial products that are being built, though, around other crypto assets that in many cases are securities. And that's where obviously the SEC comes in. So a lot of digital currencies are issued on different protocols, Ethereum being one of them. Ripple, XRP being another one. And
hold on, define protocol in this context. You're saying they're being issued on these different protocols. What do you mean?
So Bitcoin, again, is the original blockchain, but then after that, there came many others. And some of them are very, very popular, like Ethereum, which was issued in 2015, 15. That is a proof of stake, which I don't want to get into too much on that, but that's just another very popular protocol. And what's happening is companies and individuals are issuing different tokens on different protocols. And then that's where the regulation comes in. Because if you issue an unregistered security, and many times they're classified as that, American regulators and other regulators sometimes will chime in and in many cases crack down on that. The good news is when it comes to Bitcoin, generally that's been classified as not a security. It's generally been classified in many cases as a commodity, or it is completely decentralized. You know, there's no boss of Bitcoin. There's no Bitcoin company. It's kind of like oil or corn. I mean, it's a commodity. There's no boss of oil. It's just out there.
Well, okay, so here I'm not quite understanding that because, I mean, corn is owned, let's say, by the farmers who are planting it.
Yeah.
Don't they own it? They sell it to distributors.
So the folks that sell it, the corn brokers or the corn distributors or the cereal companies, they work around that specific commodity. Bitcoin's the same way. So Bitcoin can be sold through exchanges. And those are the companies that administer the brokering and the selling. Those are private companies.
Okay, but that's not to be. So in my mind, I'm thinking, if I go to an exchange, why is that different than from going to the bank to deposit my? I mean, again, I'm bringing it to real simple terms. I'm going with my cash, or my silver, and I'm going to the bank and I'm going to deposit it. So in this case, I take my Bitcoins digitally and digitally put them with the exchange, right?
The exchanges are different than banks, but you can acquire different financial products at your bank, like Wells Fargo or Bank of America. And in the future, they will be, a lot of them already are beginning to provide custody solutions for Bitcoin. But in the future, I think most banks, most financial institutions will provide cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, as a service. And because they're going to have to. I think you'll see more and more of that.
Okay. So let's go back to what an exchange is. Because I
Yeah,
think
sure.
it's kind of
So it's just
a
like,
new
so
term
an
in this
exchange,
context.
think of it as just like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, whereas they distribute and trade stocks. And then there's commodity exchanges like SIBO and the CME Group. They broker commodities, like we talked about corn and oil. And then there's cryptocurrency exchanges like Coinbase, like Gemini, like eToro and Kraken, and they distribute cryptocurrencies. And soon, and many of them are now also doing NFTs.
A
Which
subject
is
near
a
and dear to
rabbit hole
my
we can go
heart.
down.
We're going to go down that just a little bit because I am very excited to tell everybody that Dan and I have been working together on the concept of doing these kinds of interviews, if you will, or learning interviews on a quarterly basis, because the industry is changing so unbelievably fast that everything you're learning today in 3 months' time, there are going to be some differences, right, Dan? So we're actually talking. Yeah, so we're talking about taking all these kinds of technologies that are affecting everything we do in work and play and updating them quarterly so that you can keep up with what's going on. My head is spinning with a zillion questions, as they always are when I talk to you. So, okay, when you talk about a protocol in Ethereum, I think of Ethereum, if this makes any sense, kind of as a train with a bunch of, what are they called? The containers on the train.
Yeah.
So your corn or your coin could be in different containers on this train. The train is Ethereum, right?
And I've never heard of that analogy before, but that's interesting to put it that way.
I just made it up.
There's some truth to that. I think, Ethereum, which is by market cap, the second largest cryptocurrency, second largest blockchain, it was created a lot differently than Bitcoin. The difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum primarily is because with Ethereum, you can build upon it. It's much more malleable. A lot of fantastic projects are being built on Ethereum. You can't really build that much on Bitcoin. I think in the now and in the future, Bitcoin will be looked upon as somewhat of the reserve asset. It'll be there. It'll be there as the reserve, kind of like gold is. People don't spend gold every day. It's there.
Right.
Ethereum is fantastic because it is so much easier to build upon, and that's where a lot of these different crypto token projects are being developed. NFTs are being built on Ethereum. The metaverse, which I'm sure we've all heard about recently, most of that's being built on the Ethereum platform. And then Ethereum itself has its own token, its own currency. It's called Ether, which is also the second highest by market cap. That's trading for about $2,400 or so a coin.
Wow.
The difference, though,
you're saying
Ethereum,
Ether? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Ether is a cryptocurrency.
Ether and Bitcoin are the same.
Though. No, they're different. They're both cryptocurrencies, but Ethereum is not scarce. There's no cap to it because the consensus mechanism is different. It's not proof of work. Proof of work is Bitcoin. Proof of stake is Ethereum. And
you got to define that. You got to define that.
Yeah, we can dive into that, but generally blockchain 101, there's two main different types of consensus mechanisms, which means how does the blockchain rather operate. So Bitcoin is based on proof of work, which means just what it says. You have to work to create and to develop it. And that is typically, in this case, the mining process with Bitcoin is proof of work. Proof of stake, on the other hand, is quite different. We don't need to get into the technicals behind it, but it does not require mining. Now, I kind of misspoke. Ethereum currently is proof of work, but they're migrating to proof of stake. And I don't need to get into it too much, but it's they're doing that because there's issues around the mining process, and Ethereum there's also scaling issues. And if Ethereum wants to continue to scale as it currently is, they're going to need to change their consensus mechanism to proof of stake. And from what we're hearing, and we speak to a lot of the folks in the industry regularly, it could be within the next year or so, maybe longer, but it's going to happen. And when that happens, it'll proliferate even more.
Okay. Again, I got to bring it down to something that I understand. So the reason you can't just create more Bitcoin. It has to do with the way it was originally created. Yeah. And what you're saying is Ethereum is something that can be built upon. So you can create, tell me if this is right, other currencies, other cryptocurrencies, other things of value like NFTs, which I do want to talk about. Smart contracts.
You can't necessarily create an extra cryptocurrencies on Ethereum, but you can create tokens and you can create projects.
So define what that is then.
Well, so the projects that I just mentioned earlier, like the voting or the renewable energy credits or the agriculture use cases, most of those types of projects are built on the Ethereum blockchain or a couple other alternative blockchains that we won't get into today. But those are built on Ethereum because again, it's very builder friendly, and it's much more. It's not as it's a lot different than Bitcoin from just a non-technical standpoint. Ethereum and other ones are far easier to build these incredible projects. And
so can we talk about a project for a second and then go back
sure.
to whatever else I was asking you about?
No, that's fine.
Because when you talk about building a project, so without having, anything technical, if you're building a project, you might grab some blocks and sticks and wood and, do you know what I mean? Like when I hear the words building a project, that doesn't resonate specifically with how it works with on this blockchain. So can you give us some more real world examples of that?
Yeah, so there's the pharmaceutical industry, for example. There's some pilot projects that are going on out right now. The FDA actually just piloted one, a pharmaceutical tracing system. They are working to improve the supply chain. So blockchain, in some cases, it could be an Ethereum-based blockchain, can improve secure prescription drug tracking. It can improve the pharmaceutical supply chain. It can protect pharmaceutical product integrity. And so that's transforming the healthcare space. That's one example. Another one is agriculture. So down in North Carolina, their university, they're doing a fantastic project that's tracking honey, which, honeybee honey, by creating a blockchain-based traceability system. And I didn't know this, but honey is one of the most faked, counterfeited foods in the world, and it depresses honey prices for legitimate producers and farmers. So it limits their production to the market and it defrauds buyers. And so what this is doing, this is just one example, they're building this traceability system that would be able to track bona fide, legitimate honey from farm to table and provide verification for the different sources. Starbucks actually is interested in this. It might not be the Ethereum blockchain, but Starbucks is exploring this when it comes to sourcing coffee beans, which is another free trade issue. So that's everyday life that these technologies, Ethereum, for example, could affect society. And so that doesn't include that has nothing to do with like the cryptocurrency side. That has to do with the actual building on top of the platform.
Okay, so bottom line is by using this technology, and by virtue of what the technology offers, its immutability, its distributedness, if you will. Is that even a word?
No, you're right. That's the main difference. The main difference between just a regular database and a blockchain is the cryptographic nature of it. That's the key.
Right. So that way, it's really proof. That's where you're saying proof of work or proof of stake. It's really that this is a record that cannot be changed. So you know what you're getting. There's no fraud.
Yes.
And that's kind of huge, especially when we're dealing with issues like counterfeit, whether it's money or drugs. There's a lot of scuttlebutt years ago about, counterfeit drugs coming from other parts of the world. Okay. So basically what you're saying is that the blockchain is a way that we can be really sure of all things that are on it and all things that are using it. And it's much more trustworthy. And I don't see any downside to this at all. What's the downside? There must be some downside.
Not so much a downside, but it's not necessarily used and needed for everything. I think some of the misconceptions whenever you have these new technologies that pop up, it's like the new wheel. It's going to change everything. And there's a lot of instances where, it might not be necessary to have a blockchain. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if you're a business owner and you have a fantastic system running and you put a lot of time and resources into your database, and if a blockchain-based update system will maybe save you 1 or 2%, I don't know, the cost of ripping out all your existing piping to create a brand new system, you need to do the cost benefit analysis. But it's very effective, like in a lot of areas where privacy is very important, and like medical records, healthcare records. A lot of that I think is going to happen in the future because some of that's extremely sensitive. But it's not the end all be all. It's like any other technology. It's going to be reliable for some and not for others.
Okay, got that. So, besides buying, let's say buying and selling cryptocurrencies, I'm talking more like on an individual level. I would assume, as you said, if you're a company, it may be right for you, it may not be. Just real quickly though, if I were going to open up a flower shop on the corner of, 47th and 2nd, given the fact that flowers are sourced from lots of other places around the world, et cetera, if I were going to start up a company, even something as basic and non-techy as a flower shop, would it make sense to start using the blockchain? Because at least I know that my tulips are coming from where I want them to come from in Holland, kind of thing.
I think it's worth it. I mean, it also depends on your customer base. In this day and age, a lot of people are very concerned and very spirited about where they're getting their goods from. Whether it's vegetables, whether it's food, where it's sourced, and in many ways that could be a way also to attract new business. I mean, I know a lot of companies that simply begin accepting Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies for payments. Campaigns are doing this now as we speak. It just by simply doing that, having that offering that as a payment mechanism or medium, it just gets them extra business. So that's just another plus. I think it'll become much more common. Like 15, 20 years ago, not everybody accepted debit cards or credit cards. Now it's everywhere. When you started offering that as an option, you'll get more business because people don't want to pay in cash. And so I think down the road that may happen.
I think you're right. I mean, everything takes time, beyond the early adopters. I thought it was amazing that our governor here in New York took his first paycheck in cryptocurrency.
Oh yeah, the new mayor of New York. That's right.
Did I say governor? I meant mayor.
Well, hopefully she will too. But I'd say, Eric Adams and elected officials across the country are actually starting to take this a lot more seriously. The mayor of Miami is a leader in this. Now the mayor of New York. And then there's several other, senators and congressmen too.
Right. I think that it's a good signal that they have an interest in promoting these technologies, because the bottom line is, as you said, it's here. This is not the way of the future. This is the way of now, and it's only going to change more and more as time goes on. I just got to ask you, because I'm sure there's people in the audience who want to know this. What the heck happened with Bitcoin? It lost $150 billion worth of value on last Friday, was it? My facts might not be exactly right, but you get the idea. What happened?
I mean, so
what does that mean?
It's been bad the last bad week. I think so. If you're in it for the finance, the money, it was pretty bad week. But it also depends on when you got in. So, for example. Bitcoin last year, the calendar year 2021, it outperformed, most hedge funds by a long shot. It wasn't even close. It had one of the best years ever. Now, calendar year, just this year, it's been a pretty bad year. But all things considered, it was trading, for, under, 20,000 for 4 years. So, it's again, it depends. If you're going to be a long-term holder, it makes sense to have it for a long-term vision. This is not a 1 year in and out type of hold.
It's just like a stock, right? If you're using it as an investment, right? It's just like a stock. They say the same thing about the stock market.
Well, it outperformed the S&P. By a long shot. So I think it just depends to what your appetite is. There's some people really embrace the volatility. So remember, with volatility comes far, far greater rewards as well. So if you can stomach that, and if you're interested in that, that's just the nature of the beast. It's going to be volatile for the conceivable future, and it could be volatile going up, and it could be volatile coming down. But I think the folks that get into trouble are the ones that just use too much. They use leverage, and they don't plan.
And I think it's good to say right here that neither Dan nor I are financial advisors licensed anywhere to give financial advice, etc. I will say, though, that I have some friends who are not exactly in your industry, but pay attention a lot. And they're saying, this is not legal advice. This is just anecdotally speaking, go buy Bitcoin. Because it's, probably going to continue to do well in the long term. Again, this is not financial advice
Deborah,
by any licensed person.
We heard the same thing. I mean, the groups that, members of our association, we've brought on many funds. We've brought on, some of the biggest names in the space are talking and embracing it now. Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio, these big names. These aren't stupid people. These are very smart people. So again, not investment advice, but it's just really a testament to the legitimacy of it as a technology. I think folks owe it themselves to continue to learn and to continue to research. And I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to, because I'm not a technical person. But I've been very passionate about this for quite a long time, and I think it has a long-term promise.
Yeah, for sure. It's already very much becoming evident. Let's talk about real quickly some sort of jobs of the future, because clearly with the advent of this technology growing in many different directions, what are some of the things that people who are, let's say, are not so technologically inclined right now, what kind of things can they bring to the table to this world? And,
that's a great question. My association, so I head up industry affairs. So my main job is member services and growing the industry, not the technical side. And we have almost 3,400 job openings right now that we got to get filled. And this is throughout 75 different companies. I have a link to our jobs board on one of the slides, but I can share it with your team as well. But these are and they're way beyond just technical jobs. Sure, it helps if you're interested, if you're a software developer, if you're an engineer, you can command your own salary. They're high demand. But there's also a huge demand right now for compliance from the regulatory side. There's huge demand for attorneys. There's a big demand for sales and business development. And one of the things I'm seeing a big demand for too is artists. And it's funny, people say, how does that fit in? Well, it fits in because of the massive growth we've seen of non-fungible tokens, which is NFTs. This is a fast growing space. Just last week, the Google search data for NFTs for the first time surpassed the Google search for crypto. So that to me, it's booming right now. And we can do a separate NFT discussion, but I just want to mention that because there's a misconception that you can only get involved in blockchain if you're a coder, or if you're a technical software or mainstream engineer. And the answer, that's not true. There's a big demand, and the proof's in the pudding. You can take a look at some of the job postings that we have, marketing, social media. And there's a big demand for people that can actually talk about this in a way that doesn't send people, into the twilight zone. It's important because most people don't need to know the underlying dynamics of specific technologies. We use credit cards every day. We turn our car on every day, and very few people understand the dynamics behind the internal combustion engine. But we still drive.
That's absolutely right.
So blockchain's the same way.
That makes total
sense. It's going to be important for folks to know that.
That makes total sense. Where can people go to learn more about this kind of stuff? It seems to be kind of everywhere, but can you pare it down a little bit for people who don't want to get inundated and feel like they've got deluge of info?
And again, I'm wide open. I really enjoy speaking with people, even if it's one-on-one, if they have any specific questions. But there's some great books that I've read and I've recommended over the years. I have a list, and there's some great websites and some resources. So, CoinDesk .com is a very well-respected news site in the blockchain industry. It's a great source for you to get updates on the industry, as well as regulatory updates, financial updates. We know them very well. Our website, the blockchainassociation.org, we're a neutral group, we're a trade group, so we don't represent any one specific company. And so we're always happy to give anybody an update. And there's podcasts. There's a lot of good ones out there. and I'd be happy. I don't have the list handy here, but I'd be glad to help, because I think it's important to steer people in the right direction.
Absolutely, absolutely, because there is a lot of misinformation out there.
There is, unfortunately.
We are almost out of time, and I just want to say that you have so graciously offered everyone in this audience to be able to connect with you. And well, there's his Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm looking at Spuller, so I said Spitter. His Twitter address and his email. And Dan, really, that is so gracious. He said that if you have questions you want to ask him directly, he will get in touch. Also, I'm happy if you have questions, you can send them to me at deborahAlbertNYC@gmail.com, because I'm curious what questions you have. Because as we continue to do these kinds of conversations, I want to make sure everybody's questions are answered and that we're all learning as we go together. So, wow, Michelle, anything else out there? I mean, I have millions of questions.
I know we probably had a ton of questions.
We do, and we didn't talk that much about NFTs, and we will. We're going to talk about NFTs. Yeah. We're going to talk about the metaverse. We're going to talk about all this cool stuff, but it just takes more than an hour to get to it. So maybe one more question from the audience, Michelle?
Oh gosh, I've been trying to find this question to queue it up, but it's like it has disappeared and I cannot find it. But it's the question from a Porvi, and she wanted to know what impact does blockchain currency have on the banknote industry, if any. And I just want to say everyone has lots of great questions. Feel free to reach out to Dan directly. You can always email Deborah also. You can also comment here. We'll find a way to communicate the answers to you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You want me to answer the banknote question? I can take a stab at it.
Unfortunately, I can't find it. So we're just going to have to
go but you said it. It's okay.
Many prompt. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think she was probably referring to, again, what we discussed earlier about the central bank digital currency. And to me, I think the Federal Reserve will always keep cash as an option, okay? And it's funny because cash is actually far more anonymous than any cryptocurrency, because, anyway, they're going to continue to have banknotes. But I think what they're going to be doing in the not too distant future is they're going to issue some form of a fiat-based government issued digital currency, and it'll be accessible to us. It'll probably be distributed to us through your commercial bank, or perhaps from the Federal Reserve directly, similar to how we get stimulus checks. There's a lot of discussions being on right now, and actually the Federal Reserve put out a request for comment and public recommendations, and so it's a very important topic, and it's going to be, I think, a big part of the next few years, how the U.S. government's going to be doing this. But they're going to. I think there's going to be some type of central bank digital currency issue that will run in parallel with the other crypto assets.
Yeah. So listen, I have time for just one more comment. Literally, we have like a minute. I always ask, and I think I know the answer to this. I think the answer is going to be quite clear just because you're here. When I say, what do you think about the future of work? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Oh, well, Zoom. No, just teasing. I think digitization probably is the first word that comes to mind, and that can encompass way beyond just blockchain. Right. I think also being nimble is important, and being versatile, because I think the concept of the 9-to-5 work is perhaps a thing of the past. And It's exciting, though. It's a very big plus, too, because I think people are going to eventually be able to have a lot more fulfilling careers by doing types of work and being engaged in something they love doing far more than they were in the past.
And the digital world enables us to go beyond whatever we're doing and know about right now. I mean, there's so many things we don't even foresee. So you're right.
So the metaverse is probably the next frontier that we probably can.
That's the next topic.
That's the next
Dan,
topic.
when you want to talk about that?
I need some time to get my head wrapped around it myself, but I definitely would love to cover it because it's important, and that also is the future of work too.
Everything's the future of work. Everything we're doing. So I want to just thank you a million, and I want to thank the audience a million plus. We will be doing more of these, talking about these new technologies, or not so new, as I said, that are affecting the future of work. So stay tuned, and thank you all for joining us. Have a good day.